This week we are studying Kenya, and this first part focuses on just a brief background of the place and its people. There are some statistics on the population, health, and ethnicity, but mostly photos of the rural and urban life and some photos of children in school so that you get a sense of what life is like visually for people in this country. The second part will focus on rural Kenyan women's lives. The photos you're about to see came about through a linkage between UNCG and Edgerton University. The University at Edgerton had teachers who wanted graduate degrees, and specifically 3 women came and finished their PhDs in the 1990s in human environmental sciences. In exchange, Edgerton University provided some cross-cultural experiences for faculty and undergraduate students. There were 3 trips, and I was fortunate to go on the 3rd trip in 1993. We stayed with Kenyan families. We worked with the faculty at Edgerton. The university there prepares people who will be agricultural extension agents and home economics extension agents. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And we also met with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Agriculture in Nairobi. So these pictures, for the most part, are from that trip. Here is a map of the continent of Africa. I wanted you to be able to see Kenya in relationship with the other countries. You see it's on the east coast with a border along the Indian Ocean. I think that Kenya looks a little bit like Utah, if that will help you remember where it is. Here is a map of Kenya itself, and you can see some of the major cities. Nairobi, where the star is the capital. Nakuru is west. It's kind of a small town of 260,000 people. And Njaro is where the university was, and it's only about 11 miles west of Nakuru. It's not on the map, but you can see where Nakuru is. Now on over next to Lake Victoria is Kisumu. And I point this out to you because it is just 30 miles west of Kisumu. Is a little village called Kiligo, which was the home of Barack Obama's father. Notice the Lake Victoria, which is in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. Notice the Rift Valley to the north. Notice the Serengeti Plain that runs in the south of Kenya down into Tanzania. That is, most of that is a game reserve where there are millions of animals and a variety of different species of animals. Since you saw the Great Rift Valley on the map, I think it's important that you know what that is. It is an extraordinary phenomenon stretching 3,000 miles from Syria in the Middle East to Mozambique in southern Africa. It was actually caused by a tearing in the Earth's crust about 20 million years ago. And in places in Kenya, it just looks like the Grand Canyon, maybe. There'll be huge cliffs and then deep depressions down into the earth. At some places, the Rift Valley is below sea level and sometimes fairly high, as in southern Kenya. It's narrowest at a few dozen miles up to 100 miles wide, the narrowest part being just north of Nairobi. It's characterized by desert, flat arid lands, fertile farmlands, and steep cliffs, as I mentioned, as you can find in Kenya. And the shaded part on the map on the left shows you just how wide that is through Kenya. And here I am, 17 years ago, with the Rift Valley behind me, so you can kind of see how it looks. In Kenya, no matter what direction you looked, it seemed like that there were mountains surrounding you, and that was because I was most of the time in the Rift Valley. The pictures that you can see are not very good. This was before all of our technology, digital technology, and in fact I had taken these pictures on slides which don't keep very well. But in spite of that, I wanted you to get some actual pictures from Kenya. So we'll start with the Rift Valley. I'm showing this picture of the flag of Kenya for what it symbolizes for Kenyans. Black symbolizes the majority population, red for the bloodshed for freedom, green for the natural wealth, white for peace, and the Maasai warrior shield and cross spears symbolizes the defense of freedom. The next few slides are about the population of Kenya in regards to health, and you see the life expectancy in the world from 1975 to projected 2025 versus Kenya, and you see how the life expectancy is much lower and took a big dip in 2000 and is only now coming back up, but not near as high as for the world, and we need to think about why that is. And in this slide we see the population of Kenya by age groups, again over a 50-year period. The bottom part that's sort of maintained the up to 15 years, then the middle green part which has gotten large, people in the age group from 15 to 65, and then you see older than 65 is hardly changed at all, this narrow little slip. And you probably are guessing by now what one of the factors are that lead to not very many people in this age group, and also why the life expectancy has changed so much. And of course, as with other African countries, HIV/AIDS is the issue. You see a large number of adults and children living with AIDS, 2 million in 2008. The good thing is the middle section of this, that the prevalence of adult HIV/AIDS has dropped considerably just between 2000 and 2008. But when compared to sub-Saharan Africa, it's still higher, and much higher than the rest of the world. And then at the bottom, the number of children that are orphaned. That's a lot for a small country of not very many people. Good news, though, is that in 20 years from 1980 to 2000, the literacy rate was increasing for both men and women, and looks pretty good for men and not too bad for women, although you can see the gender difference there. So who are the Kenyans? Well, there are from 40 to 70 tribes or ethnic groups depending on who you ask, and language is the main criteria for determining a tribe, although most Kenyans speak 3 languages: their tribal language, Swahili, and English. There are 3 main linguistic groups: the Bantus, who came from Nigeria and Cameroon about 400 AD, and the largest of these are the Luhya and the Kisi over by Lake Victoria, and the Kikuyu in the Rift Valley. The Kushites came from northern Africa around 2000 BC, and there are some Somali-speaking in this group up towards Somali, as well as 2 other groups in northwest Kenya. The Nolites came from Sudan and Egypt around 400 AD, and they include the Lua, who live in the Lake Victoria region, who you will be seeing most of today, the Kalenjin in the Western Highlands, and the Maasai. Here it's a listing of some of the largest tribes. The Kenyan total population is only 40 million people. The Kikuyu is the largest ethnic group, then the Luhya, the Lua, Kalenjin, Kambi, Kisii, and Maasai. And I've included some pictures of the Maasai because they're probably the most famous ethnic group in Kenya. Unlike the other groups, they are the only groups that still follow the ways of their ancestors. They haven't been industrialized or westernized like most of the rest of the groups. They're recognized by their bright red clothing and their beaded jewelry. What look like collars around the women in the top picture are actually rows and rows and rows of tiny beads that are strung together. They are cattle herders. They believe, in fact, that God has given them all the cattle in the world, and so that's what they do. They're famous for their jumping dances, and so there are a couple of pictures. They live in mud shelters, homes, which you can see them leaning against in the top photo. Of course, the other famous person with a Kenyan heritage is Barack Obama, whose father was born in Kenya in Kiligo, a small rural farming village in western Kenya near the equator and Lake Victoria. His step-grandmother and uncle still live there. It's a very poor area with many families living on about $1 a week. And here you see a picture of President Obama and his step-grandmother when he visited in 2006. They are Lua. About 80% of the Kenyan population live in rural areas. And the Luas, even those who live in urban areas, consider their home to be in the rural areas. So here's a few pictures of the rural landscape. One of the reasons I took so many pictures of fences is because there aren't very many good fences, and you see cattle being herded everywhere, down the middle of the road, the side of the road, grazing in the ditches. All these cattle look pretty thin. It was a good example of this rural atmosphere. There are also in Kenya huge plantations, and this is a picture of tea pickers, because as you recall, when the British came to Kenya, the British government just granted and loaned and gave away much of the Kenyan land to British citizens, and so part of what they did was to create these huge plantations because the land in places is very fertile. If you have ever seen the movie Out of Africa, it's the story of one such European citizen who went to Kenya to run a coffee farm. Karen Blixen is an author from Denmark, and she hired then the indigenous people to work on it, such as what you see in the picture here. And here is a picture of Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. It's home to about 3 million people. Not large compared to large American cities, but a modern city. The colored picture is the one I took in 1993. The insert at the bottom is more recent. And here's a shopping mall that we went to in Nairobi. um, similar to a shopping mall that you might go to here in Greensboro. On the other hand, you did see differences in a modern city of Nairobi versus what you see here. In this picture is the parking lot of the hostel where we stayed while I was there, and you notice the woman in the sort of the middle of the photo appears to be sweeping, and she's cleaning up the parking lot. But what she's using is a long branch, and at the bottom she has tied small branches of a tree that still have leaves on it. So that is what she is using to sweep the sidewalk with. They use everything. They make do with what they have, and this was an excellent picture of that. This too shows the rural side of an urban area. This building was the Home Economics Extension headquarters in Nairobi for all of Kenya, which in the U.S. would have been some place in Washington, D.C. But I think the lack of modernness in this building and the chickens in the yard may also reflect the value of home economics in a large city. Here is a neighborhood in Nakuru. Now it's a much smaller sized town, 250,000 people, but you can see the roads, the type of buildings. Doesn't look like the kind of a small town you might see in the U.S. And Nakuru was where the family lived that I stayed with, and so this was the neighborhood that we came and went from. This is the home of Rhoda Morogo, who was the Home Economics Extension agent for the entire Rift Valley, which was a huge area. I'm sitting with 2 of her 5 children. Gladys, who was 4, is on my lap, and Nancy is next to me, age 8. They had electricity and a television. During the time that I was there, they liked to watch a Brazilian soap opera that was dubbed in Swahili called The Rich Also Cry. I just thought that was so funny. I had a bedroom of my own. The kids had one and the parents another, and there was a kitchen. They hung pictures and calendars on the wall about 6 inches from the ceiling, like you see on the back wall. So you can kind of see what their living area was like. I do wish this picture was better because I will never forget this sight. The entire lake had a pink border all around it. In the back of the picture at the lake, you see this wide sort of white area, and down at the front near the trees there's a little ribbon of white. All of that was pink. Can you guess what it was? Does this help? Pink flamingos. Lake Nakuru is the home to thousands of these, and the sight of them around the edge of the blue lake was just magnificent. The next few slides refer to Edgerton University. Here's just a glimpse of the 2 undergraduates from UNCG who went with a student from Edgerton. They were making ugali, I believe, which is corn, like a ground corn that you cook with water until it becomes very, very stiff, sort of like cream of wheat when you let it get cold, and it just fits to the mold of the bowl, and they slice it off, and that's something that the Kenyans ate almost every day. Lord Egerton was given land in Kenya, like many of the aristocracy were, and he built this huge castle for his bride. when he died, he gave the land for a university, hence the name Edgerton University. And we went inside, and it was just as magnificent as it looks from the outside, although it is in somewhat disrepair. And you see children in the left-hand corner of this picture. This was the first time in my life that I recall that children laughed at me. And they did. These children laughed at the four of us white women when we came up there and pointed at us. And I assumed it was because they hadn't seen very many white people. But when we got out our cameras, they all lined up. And you see even the little girl on the right picked up her sibling so that they could be in the picture. So while they hadn't seen very many white people and thought they were weird, they knew what a camera was. The negative part of this is that several families with children like this were now living around in the corners and the hidden spaces of this building now, in which no one lives. The next few pictures are of children and young people in school. Because they were colonized by the British, they wear uniforms like the British did, and their schools are taught in English. So children who are able to go to school all know their native language, plus most of them know Swahili, and they learn English through school. I have never seen cuter kids. These were preschoolers on the Edgerton University campus, and in this picture they were preparing for a celebration and they're dancing. That little girl in the middle I wanted to bring home with me. And you can see they were having a good time. This was a grade school classroom. Very primitive to our standards, but like most grade school classrooms, there's the students' work all along the walls in the back and on the side. This was one of the undergraduate students that was with us at the back looking at their, and you see their two teachers at the front. Again, they're in uniforms. This was a home economics classroom, and these are women, even though they have very short hair. Their hair actually isn't so short, but it is so tightly curled that even though it might be a couple of inches long, it's flat to their heads. Now, granted, this was 1993, but the Singer sewing machines were about 50 years older than that. And here's a pretty good picture of the home economics teachers at this school. These two slides are just about where you can find some more visuals about Kenya. I would particularly like you to look at the Facts About Kenya, the 3-minute video. But there are some other videos and pictures and stories about Kenya, and particularly about the Kenyan election crisis 2 years ago, and then what happened a year after that, what people thought about it. And this slide is just a list of 3 movies about Europeans who settled in Kenya. I haven't seen the second 2, but Out of Africa is one of my favorites. All of these movies are about real people, and you do get a glimpse of how they thought about the indigenous people and what that relationship was like. So if you have free time, you might check one of these out.